Hi, everyone. So welcome to our NIH Diversity Supplement Lunch and Learn virtual, so no actual lunch provided, I'm sorry. Um, but my name is Sabrina. I'm a program manager within the Center for Diversity and Health Equity with Seattle Children's, and I'm joined by my colleague, Chris Blair, Research Development Specialist with the Cancer Consortium Research Development Office. And just want to give you a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. So we'll go over what a diversity supplement actually is, go over each of our programs here at Seattle Children's and at Fred Hutch. And then we're going to have a panelist Q&A with some past awardees of diversity supplements. And then we'll end with some resources and contact information. And also, I just want to note that this presentation is being recorded. So we will definitely share the recording and then any of the slides later on after the session. So I also just wanted to give a quick shout out before starting to our panelists today. We have Najma Abdi, who is a postbac fellow, Jonathan, who is a graduate student researcher, and then Lonnie, who is a clinical research coordinator, all within Seattle Children's. So I'm going to kick it off to Chris now to give an overview of the diversity supplement.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for participating today, both the panelists and also to all the attendees who have made time to learn a little bit today about NIH Diversity Supplements. So the Diversity Supplement is an NIH funding mechanism that provides additional funding that is intended to enhance the diversity of the national research workforce by supporting research trainees who have been historically underrepresented in the biomedical, clinical, and behavioral sciences as defined by the NIH. Through this opportunity, trainees are provided with research experience, mentorship, and career development, while also allowing principal investigators to receive additional funding for their eligible parent grant. And so this additional funding is the supplement aspect that you're hearing about. And we'll go into a little bit more details on what it means to be an eligible parent grant in a few moments. So this proposed research experience really must be an integral part of an already approved and ongoing the already approved and ongoing research of the parent award. And so that would be, a grant that is held by an investigator in a lab somewhere. And this research must have the potential to really contribute significantly to the research career development of the candidate, but also supporting the goals of the original research project. Diversity supplements benefit trainees because they provide salary support to work on a particular project that's related to your career trajectory. They can provide funding for summer internships, gaps between your different levels of training, perhaps between undergraduate and graduate school, or even high school students, for up to 1 to 2 years, depending on the candidate's training level. There is some support in the form of a small stipend for manuscript and for manuscript preparation and travel to meetings. And these supplements must show a commitment to a candidate's career on behalf of the NIH, which can lead to a higher likelihood of funding in the future. And I'll also say, if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or just interrupt and let us know what you want to ask. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I think I just mentioned diversity supplements are eligible for trainees at all levels of education, all the way from high school to even junior faculty. And so it's really a broad program meant to benefit the widest group of trainees possible. There are a fair number of limitations, and so that's part of our effort here is to help you understand where to go to ask questions, because it is not completely straightforward always what the path forward is. You need to be a U.S. citizen, permanent resident, or a non-citizen national to be eligible. So this point in particular, I want to highlight. There are 3 separate categories that you can qualify under as an eligible candidate for a diversity supplement. The first, and the one you're most likely aware of, is the racial and ethnic category, and that's shown here on the left side of the screen. Or if you are someone who identifies with having a disability, would be another qualifying aspect of your background. And then importantly, there are other ways to be eligible. And so on the right side, you need to be able to check 2 of these boxes, and I'll just read through them really quickly. If you were or are currently homeless, were or are currently in the foster care system, eligible for reduced or free lunch, have had no parents or legal guardians who have completed a bachelor's degree, if you were eligible for Pell Grants, and grew up in a rural area, or if you received WIC funding. And so there are many different ways to be considered an eligible candidate. And so I would encourage you to, ensure that you or anyone you might share this information with, this is really the crux of the whole thing. And then finally, there needs to be an eligible parent grant. So this is what I was talking about earlier. These diversity supplements, they live under an existing grant held by a PI. And so the 3 things that you really need in order to be a successful applicant is you need to identify a parent grant that is eligible. And this is very encompassing of many types of grants. And so that is typically not a barrier as finding eligible grants. Next, you need to have a faculty member who is actually interested in being a mentor, because you will work closely with that person to conceive of and submit an application. And then third, I would say you just need to have an awareness that every institute at NIH, of which there are more than 20, that award grants to faculty, each institute has their own kind of specific rules that include different deadlines, different criteria, all kinds of things, different contacts, people to ask questions to. And so that information is also shared in this link here, the table of IC specific information below. All right, and then I'll hand it back to Sabrina.
Great, thank you, Chris. So now I'm going to talk about our Connections program. Now that we've covered all the challenges to finding an eligible grant, I'm going to talk to you about our program to hopefully help you figure out how to match with a PI and get started. So the program at Seattle Children's was established in 2020 after leadership recognized that there were several gaps in accessing diversity supplements. So first, it was discovered that there is simply a need to connect potential diversity supplement candidates with principal investigators who held parent grants that were eligible for diversity supplements. And there's also a need to provide additional grant writing and submission support. So that's what our program actually helps with. And we do that by connecting candidates with principal investigators who have eligible parent grants and support their application process. the program actually work. First, we identify PIs that have eligible grants, and we pull this list monthly and ask eligible PIs if they would like their study to be included in our database. And so candidates are actually then able to browse this database on our website. And if there's one of interest, the candidates can submit a form, which includes details like their CV, why they're interested in that actual particular project, and they have to attest to their eligibility. And then from there, we go through a match process. So on our end, we review the candidate's responses and send them to the PI who ultimately decides if they would like to work with the candidate on the DS application. And so if the PI agrees, then we can support the application process as much as possible. And so some resources that our program provides are examples of successful applications, a submission guide, and even a per diem grant writer, which is typically used by our postbac and undergraduate students. So we'll send out this presentation out, and you'll be able to actually click on the links for the eligible grants and the interest form, which you can submit after this seminar. And then Chris, if you want to talk about the Fred Hutch program.
Absolutely. Yeah, so similar to, almost identically to what Sabrina just explained, leadership at Fred Hutch and in the Cancer Consortium recognize this opportunity to support diverse trainees in our workforce. And so we also prepare and publish a list of eligible PI and their grants on our website. We communicate with the PIs to ensure that they want to be a part of this program. And then we provide similar resources that Sabrina, essentially what we're trying to do is mirror what Sabrina is doing in the Connections program because it's been really successful. So our goal is to kind of provide the same sorts of resources. And our focus is on Fred Hutch faculty mostly, but also anybody who is in the Cancer Consortium. It's not limited to cancer research focus. That is what we think about, but our goal is to really just match trainees with faculty regardless of the topic of study. So again, in this middle section, you can find a list to our eligible grants. We'll provide resources at the end for how to do the same thing at the University of Washington. They maintain their stuff differently. There's a QR code here that you can scan, and it'll take you to the form that some of you may be filled out, and that is one way to express your interest in a Fred Hutch research lab, or just to open a dialogue with me. Once we get past that point, eligible trainees and faculty who seem to have shared interests, I will work to help you communicate with that PI. Whatever I can do to help facilitate the process is really what I'm here to do. So this program at Hutch is less developed, I would say, than the Connections program at Seattle Children's, but this is where we're starting.
Yeah, and we've only been around for the last 3 years as well, so we're still working on improving our processes. And so if anybody has any advice or feedback for us, we're also happy to receive that as well. Yeah, so we wanted to make sure that there was enough time for our panelists and to answer any questions that you might have about what a diversity supplement is, or what the process is to apply, or even your eligibility. So I'm going to open it up now to our panelists, and I would love to have Najma, Jonathan, and Lonnie just give an introduction of who they are and their role at Seattle Children's, and maybe even some future career goals that they might have. Najma, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm Najma. I've been at Seattle Children's for 2 years. I was a summer scholars intern at first, but then I did my diversity supplement. My research currently is looking at the historical impacts of gentrification and how it affects physical activity, as well as other different social environmental measures related to gentrification, as well as the intersection of race and health behaviors. And my future goals is I'm getting my MPH starting this fall. So, was there anything else, Sabrina?
Ah, that's it. That was a lot. So
Yeah, thank
that's
you.
great. And I work with Najma on a different project, so I'm especially excited to have her with us. And then Jonathan?
Mosquito, he, him, his. I am a fourth-ish grad student. I'm in the molecular and cellular biology program, but my lab is situated in Seattle Children's in downtown. Um, so I feel like I'm interested. I guess I'd be interested to know the people here. Is people mostly like looking for research scientist opportunities or yeah, I guess because I'm realizing now this is just a broad kind of cover all. So at least I can talk in terms of science, in the lab. Um, yeah, so I was with my PI, and then we both just realized that this could be an opportunity we could apply to. So I didn't actually have a formal program or office that I can go to for help for this application. So now it's kind of nice that these initiatives are happening. And yeah, happy to answer any questions for science related.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. Lonnie?
Hello, I am Lonnie Taylor. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I currently hold a role as a clinical research coordinator, but I've worn a few hats at Seattle Children's. December will be 3 years with Seattle Children's. Currently, I just started a role that I would say would be my answer to like my future career goals. I kind of started this week a role that I was really excited about. It's an intervention trying to support low income mothers within the first 2 years of the infant's life. So super excited to get the ball rolling on that. Um, I started initially with Seattle Children's through my diversity supplement with Dimitri Christakis, and we were working with toddlers back then and looking at attention. So that was really fun. And I even got to continue with the study once they continued. We just pushed on the diversity supplement. So that was kind of where things started. And I've bounced around at a few different teams, but yeah, it's been a great process. Love the diversity supplement, and definitely, if you're interested, just apply and see what happens.
Thanks, Lonnie. Are there any questions in the chat or anything visible, Chris?
Oh, there are no questions in the chat at the moment.
Okay. Okay, no problem. I guess just to start things off, would each of you be able to explain why you decided to pursue a diversity supplement and perhaps the impact that it's had on your career training so far?
I could start. I applied for a position at the hospital initially. And once I kind of onboarded there, I realized that I kind of also wanted some research experience. So I just decided to apply for the diversity supplement. Although I was happy with where I wasn't sure if I was going to get it or not. And then it kind of took a while, but once I got it and once I was matched with a study that I was interested in, it worked out and I was able to have both positions. And once I went back to grad school for my master's, I was actually able to use some of the data from the team that I was on to kind of analyze and play with while I was in school. So that's how it's been really helpful and supportive with my career journey.
Cool, thanks, Lonnie.
I'll go next.
Jonathan? Oh, sorry, just kidding.
Yeah. So for
Yeah,
me,
Najma?
so I graduated UW last year with public health, and before then, I was really interested in going to grad school to get my MPH. But I first wanted to get a lot of like more quantitative experience in public health research, and also more exposure in what other realms of public health research there is. So I knew about the diversity supplement due to the Seattle Children's internship that I did last summer. So I connected with my PI currently, and a lot of the work that we're doing is really related to like structural racism and health equity. And that's obviously, that was one of my biggest passions, especially in public health. So being able to do a diversity supplement with that, I was able to get more experience in the quantitative aspects of how do you measure structural racism, but also more experience in what does health equity look like in the work that I do. But also I'm also doing work with Sabrina on health equity at Seattle Children's, which I think would benefit me in the long run, since I do want to get into research and get my PhD sooner after my MPH. So being able to do this, I would have a lot of more experience in research and then also manuscript writing and so on. But
Yeah, and I guess I'll just talk a little bit about my experience. For me, I guess it's helping support my graduate studies, and I feel like it's one of the most helpful things for me was when we first started applying to it. There's like a lot of, I don't know, identity intersections, right? So first generation college graduate, first generation PhD now, and U.S. citizen. But I remember talking to my PI, and I was like, do you think it would be good, helpful to mention in the application that I'm gay too? And he's like, what? I didn't know. And I was like, great, here now we gotta. And it opened up that conversation between us that I guess normally maybe wouldn't come up. Um, so I think that was really helpful. Yeah.
hmm As in, it's kind of helped you kind of bring your like more authentic self to the workforce.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's neat. That's
Yeah.
interesting. That's cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Chris, any questions?
Well, there's nothing in the chat, but I was curious to know, how much time, effort did you put into preparing your applications? How long did it take until you learned? So I guess what I'm really getting at is like, what should people, what should folks expect if they're going to go on this process in terms of timeframes? How much interaction with your PI did you have? Was that helpful? And what resources perhaps would you have liked to have that you didn't? That's a lot of questions, but
I don't know if my case is the same for everybody else, but there was somebody, it was like me and Dimitri met initially, and then there was another individual that was connected to Seattle Children's that supported me and him with creating the grant. So I remember that being really helpful, and we would probably meet like once a week. I don't remember it being very time consuming. And in terms of the application to just even interest in general for the diversity supplement, I don't remember that taking longer than like 10 to 15 minutes. And I think it was super simple. Just tell them a little story about yourself.
That's cool. Thanks, Lonnie. I think you might have been meeting with the grant writer, Shauna.
Yes.
I don't know if you.
It actually was Shauna. And I was like, I don't think it was Sabrina. So I wasn't going to mention it. Yes, it was Shauna.
Yeah, and it was before I took over for the program, but that's great. I'm so glad to hear that that was helpful for you. So
yeah, she was super awesome.
Yeah, so the grant writer, we have a new grant writer now, just so everyone knows, but that's definitely something that we can still offer to any postbac or kind of those who are newer to grant writing.
So we have a question, a few questions in the chat. This first one is for Lonnie. How was balancing those two jobs? How possible is it? And do you recommend doing that?
Well, if you're interested in kind of the hospital, I guess I consider it like bedside care, like some type of time over there. I think it is kind of worth balancing the two. And I think one of the most pressing things that made it worthwhile and easy was my managers on both sides supported that. And everybody was about just career development. And they knew that I had interest, that I just wanted to pretty much be a sponge within my first 2 years and kind of absorb both sides. And they really respected that. And I even was able to be kind of fluid. Sometimes the hospital would be really busy and I would put a lot of my effort over there. And my research manager was always really respectful of that. So far I've had great leadership, and I think that that's kind of what made it possible. But definitely Seattle Children's has so many possibilities. And if you want to kind of explore more, I would definitely stick your toes in a few things.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Lonnie. And that's definitely a good point, because I think something that we sometimes forget to, I guess, mention is that the diversity supplement isn't just extra funding so that you can get a job. It actually is funding to provide mentorship and career development. So that's actually part of the application. Is the PI has to commit to providing mentorship and understanding your career goals, and the project has to be direct, I guess, correlation to what you're hoping to achieve within that year of working or 2 years of working with that PI. So yeah, it's not just to pay for your job, but also actually to pay the PI to mentor and help grow your career, which I think is a really unique part of the diversity supplement.
We have a couple more questions. And I'm not sure who the best person to answer this is. Let's just find out. So is the research proposal meant to include aims on diversity, or is that just for eligibility? I think the way I would answer this would be, the research proposal aims would be reflective of the overarching parent grant under which the diversity supplement is awarded.
Mhm.
If you are working in a lab or interested in a lab that was focused on diversity, your aims may overlap in that way. That's the way I understand it. But if I'm mistaken or I've not, included everything I should say there, somebody please chime in.
Yeah, I think that's true. The goals or the aims of your project do not necessarily have to include diversity. It's more just about ensuring that you're eligible for the diversity supplement. And I saw Jonathan like nodding his head, so and I know he's more of a, and correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not a scientist, but I think you're more of a like bent basic science type of
Yeah.
researcher.
And for me, it looked a little different because like the grant I'm applying under as my PIs, and his is very much science focused, right? And then for me, it's not so much how does my research relate to, these diversity initiatives, but more like where along my training path can I include aspects of that. So like I can start mentioning like my community outreach programs, or when I go present, I can identify conferences that are important to me, like SACNAS or other, diversity focused conferences and training programs.
Oh, that's cool.
And then also like some conversations too is helpful to then, because my PI is not an underrepresented minority himself. So sometimes those conversations are also maybe a bit difficult, and it's So they're always difficult conversations. Sometimes I wish I could have like some maybe another person I can reach out to. So, but I think it's helpful in navigating that, and then also having conversation with them to potentially identify other people around in your department or program that you can go have these conversations with.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks, Jonathan, for mentioning that. I think in our applications, at least more recently, there's been the ability to identify co-mentors. So if your PI doesn't qualify under some of those eligibility criteria, the application will also include usually a mentor who can help you, I guess, help mentor you specifically within that diversity category. So hopefully that's more helpful at least in the more recent applications. Yeah.
We have one other question here in the chat. Sabrina, I don't know the answer to this one. I'm guessing you may. Do you need to submit a transcript with your diversity supplement application? I'm guessing this may be more relevant for high school and college. I don't really know. What do you know?
I think typically they do ask for a transcript. It depends also on the NIH center and their requirements. So yeah, Lonnie or Jonathan or Najma, can you speak on your experience with that?
Yeah, I believe you do submit a transcript. It can be an unofficial one too. And I believe, I don't know if it's changed, but I think there's a criteria, like a GPA criteria
Oh, really?
for NIH.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
I have to double check, but I didn't know. But I think there is, but I'll double check. Yeah, but yeah, you do have to submit a transcript.
For my application, I had to submit a bio sketch along with mine. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it's, yeah, so maybe it's the same across all disciplines then. And that includes like a short personal intro about you, and then maybe some, for me, included research experience, then also at the end, my transcript and grades and courses.
Yeah. And then I think for me, I also had to list out certain classes that I took that were relevant to my diversity supplement. So like anything that was related to specifically like the research aims and just listing it out like in a table or something.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Next question. Is the supplement sufficient to cover most living expenses? Is the supplement the same across all disciplines?
So I'm going to say no because unfortunately each center, and there's several different NIH centers, they all have specific requirements and specific things that they are willing to cover based on your level of your academic level. And so yeah, so it can be really different. So depending on the project that you're looking at, we can go through the different requirements, and it's still a learning opportunity for me too, because we haven't applied for a diversity supplement in every single center. But we do try to do the research to understand what is covered, what can't be covered, and also how many years that it can be covered for. So typically for like post-bac um, or high school students, it's only like 1 year that it will cover. But for the higher level, like graduate school or post-master's programs, it can cover up to 2 years of training. Do any of the panelists have anything to add to that?
I think I would say when I was applying, I had to advocate for my pay to match with Seattle Children's because I think the NIH one was really low, that it wasn't matching the average Seattle living cost. So I think so my PI, we both just had to advocate for NIH to increase it and to match like the CRC level of pay. So that could be also an option.
That's pretty much what I was going to say, is that I'm pretty sure you get paid based on what your Seattle Children's role is. So when I first got my diversity supplement, I was entry level, so I got paid as a research assistant. But if I were to apply for one now, I would get paid at my clinical research coordinator level. But I do remember having to meet with my PI and advocate a little. And I think when you advocate, you get a little bit of luck sometimes. So
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, just to chime in, we do have a research HR team, and we have certain, like based on your academic level or number of years of experience, we try to match your title to advocate for a salary that matches with that, because the NIH, which I think is a overall issue, but the salary is significantly lower than I guess, livable wage in Seattle because it's so expensive here. So we do try to do our best to make sure that we do pay equitably, I guess, for these roles. But of course, it's a challenge, but something that we try to work on.
Next question is, would we be able to apply for the diversity supplement if you're working with your PI virtually?
Well, I'll just say that there are certain limitations to working virtually. A lot of times it's just easier to be in person in Seattle due to like the project or things that you're working on, in case you need to come into the lab or be there physically. And then also Seattle Children's, we are only able to hire out of state trainees that are within like Texas, Arkansas, Florida, and there's a few others. So it's quite limited to the states that we're actually able to hire out of if you're working remotely. Najma has some little bit of experience with that, but I don't know if you need to talk about it.
Would you say then, Sabrina, that there are scenarios perhaps where that could be allowable, but
Yeah,
it's probably not likely?
yeah, I think it's probably not ideal.
Yeah.
We haven't had a diversity supplement that's been awarded for a remote project yet. I think because of COVID, that sort of changed things where that was allowed, but it still made it so hard that I don't even think we had applications for remote projects during that time. But perhaps it's something that we could shoot for and see if we can make it happen. I see that Madeline raised her hand. Do you want to ask your question?
No, I'm sorry. That was an accident.
Oh, just kidding. I'm gonna say it was a hand clap. Chris, are there any other questions?
Yeah, we still have, they're coming in. So thank you everybody for your excellent questions. Can you apply both as a master's student and a PhD? And I guess I would answer that by saying yes. It's really comes down to having that connection with the principal investigator who wants to support your application. If you're a master's student wanting to put in a supplement, I think as long as you have a training plan worked out with your PI, that's what they're looking for. And same for PhD. The next question is there a letter of recommendation required for the application? And if so, how many?
So your PI has to, well, there has to be a diversity statement, which is kind of like a letter of recommendation that your center director actually has to sign off on. So I think that's sort of as long as you have that's, I think, sort of like the equivalent, I suppose, of a letter of recommendation.
All right, we have 2 more questions. Oh, 3 more. How long are the projects normally? Do PIs normally choose individuals who are in their first or second year versus, in their third or fourth year of their PhD? I think that's a great question. I can't say that I know the answer or have any experience to draw on with that. Maybe someone else does.
I'm going to point to Jonathan because he's our graduate student.
Yeah, I mean, I think it totally depends on it's PI specific and because you're applying under their grant, so whatever their parent grant has outlined is kind of what you're going to be confined to working within the realm, right? Because the idea is you're working on a specific aspect of that grant. So yeah, I would just follow their timelines and ask to read their grant. Look through what they wrote, the timelines they anticipate, and then that's kind of how I started. And then just outline what you think you're going to be doing, and making a table for yourself.
Excellent points. Thank you.
Yeah, and oh, sorry, Chris, were you going to add something?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Our table of eligible grants actually includes if it's specified by the PI, what level of what academic level that they are looking for to work with. And so typically each NIH center, says high school all the way through early career faculty are eligible, but sometimes a PI has a specific academic level that they're looking for in terms of experience, and so that's included on our table if it's specified by the PI. And then just reading through, I usually typically am the one who reads through your interest form, and then I can work with the PI to see if that's okay, if you're a good fit for the PI in their center. And then typically through that match process, you start to begin to talk with the PI, build a relationship with them, and then they work on creating a project that suits your level of experience and what your career goals are. So yeah, it doesn't, yeah, I guess the answer is it just depends on what the PI is interested in and what y'all work on together. But yeah, so there isn't something specific that you have to like really be, have like a super high level of training or something in order to apply. And actually those with lower levels of experience, I think I would highly recommend pursuing a diversity supplement for.
So let's move on to the next question. Does having a diversity supplement provide a tuition waiver?
So sometimes there is tuition reimbursement based on the academic level. I've seen it for some graduate or some like pre-graduate schooling. So, but it just depends on the NIH center and what they will pay for. That's a good question.
The next question I have is, I think generally to the entire panel, how did you structure your personal statements in your bio sketches? That's a hard question because personal statements are, without doubt, the hardest thing to write in science.
If I remember correctly, um, I think that I just tried to aim it towards kind of the aims that I was hoping to gain from working with a principal investigator and being on a research team. I kind of directed it at that. And I think that I did kind of throw in a little bit about like a good paragraph on being diverse and how my diversity has kind of just like impacted my career path. So that would be my advice on that.
Yeah, I think I did probably the same thing. I talked about my future goals and what I want to do, or like where the research would take me. And then I also talked about my past research experience and how that would tie to me doing a diversity supplement and how it would relate.
I think it's an interesting topic, talking about diversity statements and applications in a time where college admissions are no longer taking diversity into account. And it's kind of, I mean, as a student who's been applying to these diversity initiatives the whole time, it feels really weird to have that pulled out from under you, or I guess not me, but future upcoming students. So in terms of how you write these statements, I feel like I'm a little unsure now, to be honest. Um, the way I wrote mine was just, I think I led in with um, education and talking about education and your access to it and where you came from kind of comes naturally from that, and then just bringing in your identities. It's a weird, I will say it's a weird mix of, at least for me, my application of trying to stay focused on science, because that's ultimately what I'm applying for, while still talking about, in diversity. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have several like personal statements or bio sketches that have been awarded, or like have been a part of applications that have been awarded that we're happy to like send you a sort of a baseline of what to or how to structure your bio sketch. But in the past, at least, and Jonathan, you're right that this whole thing has been kind of it might be a big change in what we're looking to do, but in the past, the diversity statements have actually had to be really direct about why you're eligible. Like, I am blah, blah, blah race, and this is how I felt that this has hindered my experience within the workforce. And it's had to be very, like, almost very overt, I guess. Because in the past, we've had bio sketches or identity statements that are a little bit more vague, I guess, and they weren't awarded. And the feedback was because they didn't get the sense that the eligibility criteria was met. And so, yeah, at least for us and moving forward until we get some other feedback, the personal statements do need to be a little bit, or need to be, I guess, directly saying like, I'm a US citizen, I'm eligible in this and this way. So hopefully there doesn't need to be any of that like sort of skirting around, but maybe it's kind of a new thing that we'll have to figure out as we move forward. But.
I want to echo what Sabrina just mentioned with regards to example grants. So if there are folks who would like to pursue diversity supplements with Fred Hutch investigators or University of Washington investigators with a focus on cancer, we do also maintain in our office example grants, which include those personal statements. They include the research strategy. And so those are incredibly beneficial, I think, in helping craft a competitive application. And I do also want to just note, as someone who lives in the grant space for my job, I want to point out that diversity supplements are not peer-reviewed proposals, which I think probably benefits the applicants because the success rate for a traditional grant is quite low. And so having a robust dialogue with the program officer who ultimately approves the diversity supplement, I think can really go a long way. So, having a conversation about your eligibility criteria, confirming with that individual that you are the right person for this application, and then building that into your personal statement, I think is probably an important thing to do. And if that's incorrect, also please let me know if others have a different take on that.
Okay, I think we have time for one or two more questions.
Okay, so the last question I have in the chat is, this is a simple one. How long does the application process usually take?
So for me, I sent in, I guess looking at last year, so I sent in my entrance form like February, because I know there's like times that you have to submit it by the NIH, which I think is quarter based. But so I sent it in, and then we worked on the grant for about 3 months, and I submitted it in May, and then you wait to hear back in September. So it took a while, but I think the grant portion of it was, I think, 2 months or so. Like,
I had a very similar experience, and mine was like maybe like mid 2020. So I don't know if it was just like onboarding, and that's what kind of took a while. But for me at the time, I thought it was kind of a while to end up hearing back from the IRB, which is typical, I've learned.
I feel like I'm having a little trouble remembering now because I applied when I was coming into like a little after starting grad school, and there was a lot of things going on at the time. But yeah, I think it's like a few months that I worked on it, and then you would just wait to hear back. I think that was my experience. And there's also like some parts you'll work on, some parts your PI works on, some parts you work together. So there's a little variability there.
Yeah, I would say kind of on average, it takes around like 3 months to write an application from like start to finish. And then depending on when you actually submit it, the NIH Center, they all have their own deadlines also, which on our sheet, you'll actually be able to see when the deadlines are. But we kind of help you navigate all of that and are really try to be really transparent about when you might hear back so that you're not just like having to wait around if that's not the right opportunity for you. But that is something that we understand is a barrier. Unfortunately, I think the summer is a little bit of a lull time for the NIH. So a lot of times, if you submit in the summer, they don't review it until September or October, and then you don't get funded till, October, November. So it just kind of varies, which I know right now we're in the summer. So it doesn't look promising, but you should still apply and then hopefully be able to submit something at least closer towards the start of like the fall or the new fiscal year, the NIH fiscal year. Yeah. Earlier the better.
There's one more question here, if you don't mind, Sabrina.
Mhm.
Do you need to be enrolled in an educational institution as a student in order to apply?
I had
Uh,
just graduated undergrad. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, I wasn't in school and I didn't have much research experience either. So I just was really, taking a shot in the dark.
yeah. So yeah, I think the answer was no, not necessarily. I think it's helpful to be affiliated to an institution, just because you have to have within the NIH in order to apply, have a specific identification number, which is annoying. But if you're not affiliated with an institution, then we can work something out where you're affiliated to like Seattle Children's if you're not currently a student, where you can make sure we have an identification number for you in order to apply. It's called an ERA number. It's just something that you have to have in order to apply specifically to the NIH.
Excellent. That's it
Yeah.
on our end here with the. Oh,
Erin will help you with an ERA if you don't have one. Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, we'll make sure to, Christy, mind just cutting and pasting the chat into like a Word document, and we can respond to those and also include it in some of the resources documents that we send out after the session, along with the recording and the slides with the different links. So the last slide is just a slide with our contact information and then links to our different programs and eligible parent grants, and then interest form on our end, and then for Fred Hutch, their candidate eligibility tool. And then we've also included some information for UW and then the School of Public Health's Diversity Supplement homepage with a list of their eligible parent grants. So unfortunately, we don't have anybody from UW on the call or representing their program on the call. But if you like to reach out to someone more specific, we can also help you connect with them too. So yeah, just thank you everybody for joining us, and especially to our panelists here today. We really appreciate their time, answering all of our questions, and being a part of our conversation. So I'm sure that if you have any more specific questions for our panelists, that we can give you their contact information to reach out to them directly. I'm putting them on the spot right now to say yes. But yeah, just thank you again to everybody for joining us, and we hope to hear from you about any of your questions, or if you're interested in applying. We're here to help you with all of those things. Thank you again.